My name is Mara Linwood. I'm 37 years old, and I run a modest HVAC company here in North Carolina. I didn't go to college. I didn't marry rich. I don't own designer handbags or sit on any charity boards. What I do have is a sharp mind, a skilled trade, and a business I built with my own hands over 15 years. And for most of that time, I also had a promise hanging over my head. The kind of promise you whisper to a dying father. I swore I'd look after his youngest daughter, Delaney, my half-sister. And I did. I raised her, paid for her private schooling, put aside every extra dollar to fund her dream college. Until one Thanksgiving night, she looked me straight in the eye, in the apartment I paid for, standing beside the table I had just helped cook for, and said, "Can you leave now? You don't belong here. These are important people." So I left, quietly, and as I walked into the cold night, I felt something unexpected. Not rage, not grief, just clarity. That was the last dinner I ever let someone shame me into silence. The last tuition payment I would ever make out of guilt. What came next wasn't revenge. It was a decision, a boundary, a wake-up call for both of us. Delaney came into my life when I was already grown. We shared a father, not a childhood. I was 28 when our parents died in a car accident. He and my stepmother, her mother. I had just expanded my HVAC business to a 2-person operation and was finally starting to breathe after years of barely scraping by. Delaney was 13, and suddenly, she was mine. There was no legal fight, no relatives stepping in, just a judge, a quiet courtroom, and a teenage girl sitting beside me who couldn't stop twisting the sleeves of her sweatshirt. I became her guardian because there was no one else. She didn't cry much, not at first. Not in public, anyway. She was calm, polite, a little too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you wonder what was going on inside. I didn't know how to parent a teenager, much less one who was grieving. I was just trying to hold it together, juggling client calls, job site emergencies, invoices, and now school pickups and algebra homework. At first, we orbited each other. I cooked, she ate. I dropped her off, she got out of the car without a word. She thanked me when I bought her a new backpack, but she never asked for more. I think we were both waiting for the other shoe to drop. Her waiting for me to give up. Me waiting for her to act out. But neither of us did. She was bright. Scary bright. She loved reading, languages, puzzles. While I spent weekends fixing industrial chillers and managing installations, she sat cross-legged on the couch with books about diplomacy and global markets. I knew early on she was headed for something bigger, and I didn't resent her for that. Quite the opposite. I admired it. She wanted private school, not in a bratty, demanding way, just quietly handed me a brochure one day. Harland Prep. I remember flipping through it while eating a gas station sandwich in my work truck, surrounded by tools and invoices. Tuition made my stomach drop, but I applied for grants, adjusted my schedule, picked up night calls. She got in. I made it work. We weren't close, not the way some sisters are, but we developed something that looked a lot like trust. She didn't call me Mom, and I didn't ask her to. But when she got her acceptance letter to Hargrave College at 17, she came to me first. She cried, shaking, holding the letter like it might disappear. "Can we afford it?" she whispered. I looked her in the eye and said, "We'll make it happen." I'd been saving for years. I lived in a small, aging house with a secondhand sofa and mismatched dishes. I drove the same beat-up truck for over a decade. Every extra dollar went into a fund with her name on it. The goal was simple. Give her options. Give her a shot at a life where she wouldn't have to crawl through basements or argue with subcontractors about ductwork on a Saturday afternoon. At Hargrave, she thrived. Straight A's, international business major. She spoke French like she'd lived in Paris. The first year, she called weekly, told me about her classes, her friends, her plans. I listened. I sent her care packages. I paid the bills. I didn't notice the shift right away, but slowly the calls came less often. The details she shared became curated, glossed over. I only learned through her roommate's social media that Delaney had been dating someone named Holden Briggs, a finance major whose family owned property up and down the East Coast. It didn't bother me, not at first. I figured she was growing up, finding her people. I told myself that was what I'd been working for, her freedom to choose a different world. But something else came with it. A distance I hadn't expected, like she'd climbed to a floor in a building I wasn't allowed to enter. And still, I kept paying. Tuition, apartment, books, meal plan, living allowance. I paid it all. Because that's what family does, right? By the time Delaney started her freshman year, my company, Linwood Climate Systems, had grown to 12 employees. I had contracts with local medical centers, office buildings, 2 schools, and 3 upscale residential complexes. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't struggling anymore either. I paid my bills on time, offered health insurance to my staff, and finally stopped losing sleep over every slow season. But I still lived like money was tight, because with Delaney at Hargrave, it always was. I never told her how close to the edge things sometimes got, how I'd skip my own dental cleanings to keep her meal plan funded, how I canceled a weekend getaway with Trevor, my boyfriend of 5 years, so I could pick up emergency calls and cover a surprise lab fee, how I turned down a second office location because tuition had just gone up again. When she came home for breaks, she'd comment on how minimalist my house was. She didn't say it unkindly, but I could hear it, how small it felt to her now. She brought back new words. Elevated. Curated. Tasteful. She wore soft cashmere cardigans and delicate gold rings that made my calloused hands feel like they didn't belong on the same dinner table. Still, I reminded myself, she's just growing. She's adapting to her environment. That's what education is supposed to do, right? But over time, her stories changed. They became more about who her friends' parents were than what she was learning. CFOs, diplomats, surgeons. She talked about wine tastings, ski trips, private networking dinners. She never asked how work was going, never asked about the new technician I was training, or the big retrofit job we were bidding for in the spring. And when I mentioned them, she nodded politely, then steered the conversation back to something shinier, more polished. I let it go, again and again, because she was young, because I was proud of her, because I didn't want her to feel ashamed of where she came from, even if she'd started acting like she was. Then came Holden. Holden Briggs had a face you'd expect to see on the cover of a financial magazine. Clean-cut, confident, he came from old money, real generational wealth. His parents owned a bank, sat on museum boards, hosted charity galas that cost more than my annual salary. Delaney's voice changed when she talked about him. There was an edge of calculation, like she was already trying to mold herself into what he, and his world, would find acceptable. He's really focused, she told me once. He already has a post-grad offer lined up in Manhattan. His dad's firm made the connection. That's great, I said, meaning it. He seems like he knows what he wants. He does, she said, and then quickly added. He's used to a certain kind of environment. That was the first red flag I didn't call out. Then she started talking about elevating her image. She asked if I could transfer a little more each month for wardrobe and professional development. I agreed, because of course I did. But I started to notice patterns. Requests increasing, phone calls decreasing. She never said thank you. She said, got it. That fall, she invited me to Hargrave for Parents' Weekend. I drove 3 hours, wore my best blazer, and brought her favorite almond pastries from a bakery back home. When I arrived, she met me in front of her building with a tight smile and an even tighter voice. Hey, thanks for coming. Just, if anyone asks, can you say you run a company? Maybe just keep it vague? I blinked. What do you mean? Like, say you're in operations or logistics, not HVAC, not that. The words landed heavy in my chest. I'm not ashamed, she added quickly. It's just, some people won't get it. She introduced me to her roommate's parents as Mara. She runs a regional firm. No mention of the industry. No mention that I was the reason she was there at all. That night, in the hotel room, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself what I was doing. The next morning, I wired her the rent for her off-campus apartment. Because habits are hard to break, especially when they're tied to promises made over caskets. I told myself, next semester, I'll set limits. But when the invoice came, I paid it again. Because love, real love, sometimes looks a lot like enabling. And I hadn't yet learned the difference. By her sophomore year, Delaney was fluent in the language of upper-class ambition. She knew which brands whispered wealth instead of screaming it. She'd mastered the subtle pauses that made people lean in during conversations, the soft laugh that suggested she belonged. And with Holden on her arm, she had every reason to believe she did. They were polished, Delaney and Holden. They looked like they stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. All wool coats and watch bands and curated playlists. And every time she called me, less and less frequently now, there was a slight delay before she said my name, as if she had to shift gears from one life into another. I didn't push. I kept things easy. I asked about her classes, her internship applications, her French minor. I told her work was steady, that I was proud of the team, that I'd taken on a new commercial building downtown. She listened with polite interest, but her responses always drifted elsewhere, to someone's father in venture capital, to a classmate who'd just secured a summer position in Zurich, to Holden's plans for grad school. And then she said, one day in early November, Holden's parents invited me to their Thanksgiving gathering at their estate. They have a chef flown in from New York. It's kind of a big deal. I was quiet for a moment. We always do Thanksgiving together, I finally said. I know, she said quickly, but this is just 1 year. We'll still do Christmas. And I thought, maybe you'd like to come to a small Friendsgiving dinner I'm hosting the weekend before. I didn't hesitate. Of course. Just tell me what to bring. She paused. Actually, maybe just help with the cooking. I want to make sure everything looks cohesive. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. You got it. That Saturday, I arrived at her off-campus apartment, the one I paid for, carrying grocery bags and wearing a thick sweater. The complex was new, upscale, designed with the same sterile elegance you see in condo marketing brochures. When she opened the door, she glanced past me toward the parking lot. Where's your truck? I took the Civic today, I said, gesturing back toward the aging Honda I kept for personal errands. She seemed relieved. Good. Come in quick. Before anyone sees you. Inside, the apartment had been transformed. Candles, linen napkins, a wine fridge I'd never seen before. There were handwritten name cards at each seat. It didn't feel like her place anymore. It felt like something she'd borrowed from a magazine spread. You've been busy, I said. I want it to be perfect, she replied, taking the bags from me. These people, Holden's friends, they notice everything. We worked side by side in the kitchen, like we used to. I chopped, she arranged. I prepped sauces, she checked place settings. And then, while slicing pears for a salad, she said it. When they ask what you do, maybe just say you run a business. No need to go into HVAC stuff. I didn't look up. You want me to lie? Not lie, she said quickly. Just simplify. They come from a different world, Mara. They won't get it. I didn't answer. I just kept slicing. That night, they arrived one by one. Holden first, of course, perfectly groomed and casually charismatic. Then the others, Sebastian and Madison, Zoe and Zachary, a girl named Laurel, who studied interior architecture and spoke with a New England lilt. They talked about spring breaks in Spain and internships secured through connections, about legacy admissions and ski season, and who might be at Holden's father's Christmas party. I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching Delaney float between conversations, all confidence and effortless charm, and then Sebastian, swirling his wine, looked at me. So, how do you two know each other? Before I could answer, Delaney cut in. Oh, Mara's just in town for the weekend. She's been helping with the house. Just helping. Like I was a decorator, or a caterer, or an Airbnb host. I kept my smile frozen. Actually, I'm her sister, I said, meeting Sebastian's eyes. Half-sister, technically. I also own the HVAC company that keeps this entire building cool in summer and warm in winter. There was a beat of silence. Then Sebastian gave a small, tight smile. Ah, well, useful trade. I nodded. Vital, actually. Delaney redirected the conversation like a pro, but the moment had already settled between us like smoke. Later in the kitchen, she hissed, What was that? What was what? You didn't have to make it about you. I stared at her. I didn't know existing counted as making it about me. She exhaled sharply, frustrated. Can you just, please, not bring up your job again tonight? I leaned against the counter, letting the cool marble press into my palms. Don't worry, I won't say another word. And I didn't. Not for the rest of the night. But I felt something inside me start to shift. Not rage, not sorrow, something colder, something clearer. I wasn't the one pretending to be someone else. I wasn't the one performing. I wasn't the one ashamed. I was just the one paying for the show. 3 days later, I returned to that apartment. It was the night of her real Thanksgiving dinner. The one with Holden, the one with the people who mattered. She'd invited me again, this time in a message that was more an obligation than a request. Dinner starts at 6. If you want to come early, bring the wine. I arrived at 4:30, hair curled, wearing slacks and a pressed blouse. I'd brought 2 bottles of red from a local vineyard, plus ingredients for our mother's cranberry sauce, a small attempt to sneak in something real. I knocked and waited. When Delaney opened the door, she gave me a quick once-over and nodded businesslike. You look nice. That was high praise, coming from her. I stepped inside and handed her the bags. I brought everything you asked for, and the cranberry sauce stuff too. Thought it might be nice to include at least one thing from home. She hesitated. I already bought some, from Leclerc Market, the place Holden's mom recommended. I smiled. Then we'll have 2 kinds. Let the guests decide. The kitchen was already in full swing. Dishes halfway done. Countertops covered in herbs and imported oils. She'd clearly been at it all day. I offered to help, and she put me to work, but it wasn't comfortable. It was tense, measured, like every movement had to be choreographed. She corrected my plating. She rearranged the table settings after I set them. She took a serving spoon out of my hand and replaced it with one that matched the aesthetic. Around 5:30, Holden arrived, immaculate as always. He kissed her cheek, barely acknowledged me, and placed a bottle of French wine on the counter like an offering. Everything looks amazing, he said, glancing over the dining area. Thank you, Delaney beamed. The rest of the group trickled in. Sebastian again, of course, with his smirk permanently in place. Zoe and Zachary, Madison, and 2 new faces I didn't catch the names of. Everyone dressed in layers of subtle wealth, tasteful watches, suede boots, minimalist jewelry that probably cost more than my entire week's payroll. I brought out the appetizer tray, carefully arranged with imported cheeses and crackers I couldn't pronounce. As I set it down, Sebastian looked at me, then glanced at Zachary. Always nice when the help is so efficient, he said dryly. The room went still for half a breath. Then Amanda, one of the few who had ever shown me basic decency, said, Sebastian, seriously? Delaney laughed nervously. Oh, she's not help. She's just, helping with the house. Not my sister, not the woman who raised her, just helping. I turned back toward the kitchen before anyone could see my face. Amanda followed a few minutes later, setting down her drink beside the sink. Need any help? I'm fine, I said quietly, checking on the roast. My hands were shaking. I think your cranberry sauce smells better, she added softly. I smiled without looking at her. Thanks. She leaned closer. She told me you own your own business. That's pretty amazing, honestly. My dad always said if he could go back, he'd become an electrician. He pushed me toward finance, and I hated every second of it. I finally looked at her. It's not glamorous, I said, but I like what I do. I respect it, she replied. Delaney called for Amanda a moment later, and she left me alone again with the silence. Dinner was served at 6:15. Everyone took their places, the room lit with soft amber lighting, linen napkins folded into fans. I had helped cook every bite of it, but as the guests praised the meal, Delaney smiled graciously and accepted the compliments as though she'd done it all alone. You really outdid yourself, Holden said. Everything's just exquisite, Zoe added. I picked up a few tricks, Delaney replied modestly. Holden's mom gave me great advice. I sipped my water, said nothing. Later, Holden, perhaps out of obligation, turned to me. So, Delaney mentioned you didn't go to college. That's right, I said, keeping my voice even. I went to trade school for HVAC certification. Technical school, Sebastian echoed. Like, for air conditioners? Yes, I said. I started out fixing them. Now I manage commercial contracts across 3 counties. Fascinating, Holden said, clearly not fascinated. I'm sure you're good at it, Zoe offered, and I nodded. I am. Amanda smiled faintly. Keeping hospitals and schools functional seems pretty essential to me. Delaney jumped in. Well, I'm hoping to go into international finance, so a bit different. Does that mean you never help with her business? Amanda asked innocently. Delaney laughed too loudly. No, I'm focused on bigger markets. I let it go. Until Zachary spoke up. How does someone get into AC repair anyway? Was it like your dad's thing? Our father was a mechanic, I said. He fixed things for people, and I guess I just liked the sound of that. Delaney interrupted. No one wants to hear about a plumbing shop, Mara. I blinked. Excuse me? It's boring, and honestly, embarrassing. The silence that followed was loud. Even Holden looked uncomfortable. Amanda's mouth parted in shock. Embarrassing? I repeated slowly. Yes, she snapped. You're just an AC tech. You crawl through vents. It's not exactly something I want to explain at a table like this. I stood slowly, placing my napkin on my plate. Well, I said, voice quiet but steady, I apologize for embarrassing you with my honest work. I'll leave you to enjoy the evening. No one said a word. I walked to the door, picked up my coat. Amanda whispered something to Delaney, but I didn't hear it. Didn't need to. The door closed behind me with a soft click, the kind that doesn't slam, but still ends something. Outside, the cold bit into my skin. I stood on the sidewalk, wine bottle still in hand, and thought, I will never pay for this again. Not the dinner, not the tuition, not the disrespect. I didn't cry in the car. I drove home in silence, letting the heater hum against the cold seeping through my coat. My hands didn't shake, my breath didn't hitch. I just kept repeating her words in my head like a slow, rhythmic drumbeat. You're just an AC tech. You crawl through vents? I didn't need to scream. The quiet said enough. At home, I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of wine, and called Heather, my oldest friend and the one person who had seen every version of me, broken, rebuilding. She said, what? Heather's voice snapped across the line. I told her everything, every word, every look. The moment Delaney turned her back on where she came from to impress people who wouldn't have lasted one day in my boots. Heather let me talk. Then, like she always did, she cut straight to it. She humiliated you, and she did it with your money, with your support. You're not just enabling her, Mara. You're bankrolling your own erasure. I laughed bitterly. Well, when you put it that way, you need to stop, right now. I sat up straighter. You mean, stop paying? I mean, stop pretending this is love. It's obligation, and it's hurting you. That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled out my laptop and opened up every financial file with Delaney's name on it. Tuition invoices, rent transfers, grocery money, book fees, clothing allowances, overdraft coverage. I traced every cent from the first application fee to the last transfer I'd made 2 weeks ago, $181,230.76. That's how much I had poured into her education, lifestyle, and rise to respectability. And somehow, it still wasn't enough. By morning, I had already made the decision. I opened the education fund I'd set up in her name, one I had contributed to every month for 5 years, and initiated a full transfer back to my business account. $74,000 remained, more than enough to fund her next semester and the one after that. A pop-up box appeared. Are you sure you want to proceed? Yes. I clicked confirm. I stared at the screen until the balance hit 0. No anger, no guilt. just a strange, liberating silence. I didn't tell her. I wanted the university's financial office to do it for me. I wanted the realization to arrive with official language and institutional authority. Let her feel the consequence land where it hurt most, her perfectly curated plans. 3 days passed. On the 4th day, I was in the middle of reviewing a ducting blueprint when my office phone rang. Jessica, my front desk assistant, buzzed in. "Your sister's online too. She sounds upset." I took a breath, then picked up. "Hello? Mara?" Delaney's voice came through, brittle and high. "What the hell? I just got a notice from the school. My tuition payment didn't go through. They're saying I could be dropped if it's not paid by Friday." "I'm aware." "What's going on?" "I decided not to fund your education anymore." Dead silence. Then, "You can't just do that. You've always paid. I have exams coming, Mara. You also had a dinner party where you told me I didn't belong in your world, that I was embarrassing, that my life, my work, everything I've done for you was something to hide. That was just one comment," she said, her voice shifting from anger to disbelief. "You're going to ruin my entire college career because of one bad night?" "This isn't about one night. It's about a pattern. You've looked down on me for years, Delaney. The dinner was just the moment I stopped ignoring it." "But you promised Dad. I promised to take care of you, and I did. I kept you housed, fed, clothed, and educated. But protecting you doesn't mean protecting your entitlement or your contempt." Her breathing was fast now. "So that's it? I'm just on my own?" "You have options. You can apply for financial aid, get a job, take out loans like most students, or transfer to a school that doesn't cost $60,000 a year." "I can't believe this," she whispered. "You're being cruel." "No," I said, my voice low and steady. "Cruel is watching someone sacrifice everything for you and then spitting on the life they built because it doesn't look good on Instagram." She hung up. I let the silence settle again. This time, it felt deserved. That week, I ignored 3 more calls, 2 emails, 1 long text filled with alternating rage and guilt. I didn't respond. I didn't owe her more explanations. But when Margaret and William, old friends of our fathers, called, I picked up. "Rachel, sweetheart," Margaret began gently. "Delaney says you've cut her off completely, that she might have to leave school. She may have to. That's up to her. But she's so young. You know your father would have wanted. My father would have wanted her to respect the people who made her success possible." William was less polite. "You can't use tuition as a weapon. That's not what family does." "She's 19, William. She's not a child. If she can curate a dinner party with a wine list and imported sauces, she can figure out how to submit a loan application." They both fell quiet. I ended the call as kindly as I could. Then I poured myself a coffee, went back to my office, and got back to work. For the first time in years, it was just my name on the line again. And that felt right. The following week came with silence, and then noise. At first, nothing. No texts, no emails, no, "I'm sorry." Then it began in waves, messages laced with guilt, desperation, bargaining. A voicemail where Delaney cried. A second one, angry. A third, cold and clipped. "You made your point, congratulations." I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because caring had exhausted me for too long. Then the flying monkeys started arriving. Mutual family friends, former neighbors, old church acquaintances, each one relaying a version of events that came straight from Delaney's panic. "She's scared, Mara," Margaret said on the speakerphone. "She doesn't know what to do." "She told me you blindsided her," William chimed in during his call. "No warning. That's cruel." "She's 19, I replied. "She's not helpless. She's just never been told no." And that's my mistake. They insisted I was being harsh, that I was abandoning her. "I'm not cutting her off emotionally," I said calmly, "but I'm no longer paying for her to look down on me." Most of them fell silent after that, not in agreement, but because there was nothing left to argue. 3 days later, Delaney posted photos online. Thanksgiving at Holden's estate. A long table lined with crystal glassware, a roaring fireplace in the background, her in a sleek silk dress with a caption that read, "Grateful for family that understands growth, class, and ambition." I didn't react. I just saved the screenshot. For myself. For the record. That night, while reviewing job quotes for a new commercial client, I received an email from Hargrave University. It was an automated reminder. Tuition for the spring semester was overdue, and Delaney's enrollment was at risk. It felt like a final receipt. A quiet confirmation. The next day, Jessica buzzed in again. "Your sister's here, in the lobby." I blinked. "Here? At the office?" "She looks different." Delaney hadn't stepped foot in my workspace, ever. I stood, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door to find her standing uncertainly near the front desk. Her hair was in a loose ponytail. No makeup, no designer coat, just a plain sweater and jeans. She looked young and tired. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded. "Come in." She sat on the guest chair across from my desk, eyes flickering over the framed certifications and project photos lining the walls. For a moment, I could see her trying to reconcile two truths, the version of me she'd rejected and the one right in front of her. "I wanted to see where you work," she said. I waited. "And maybe ask for a ride-along? I don't even know what you do." "Not really." I didn't say yes right away, but I didn't say no. 20 minutes later, we were riding in my truck toward a commercial building whose HVAC system had failed the night before. I kept my tone neutral as I briefed her on the client, what they needed, what we'd already diagnosed, what backup systems were in place. Inside the building, my team greeted me like always, with quick updates and respect. I introduced Delaney, but didn't explain who she was. I didn't need to. She watched as I reviewed blueprints, tested systems, gave instructions. She watched as the building manager, an older man in a pressed shirt, shook my hand and said, "You're the reason we didn't lose this lease." We left 2 hours later with the job stabilized and a follow-up scheduled. In the truck, she sat quietly for a long time. "I had no idea," she finally said. "They listened to you like you were the CEO." "I am." She blinked. "And they should. My company keeps their operations running. That gives me leverage." She looked out the window. "I thought you just fixed things." "I do," I said. "Systems, problems, sometimes people." Later that afternoon, back at the office, she lingered near my desk. "Can I come again sometime?" "You really want to?" She nodded. "I think I need to understand where I came from." That was the first time I saw it. Not fear, not defensiveness, but humility. The first flicker of something real. I gave her a part-time assistant position. Clerical work, scheduling, answering phones, organizing vendor files. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary, and it let her sit inside the engine room of everything I'd built. She didn't complain. She showed up early. She asked questions. Jessica pulled me aside after the first week. She's quick and polite. A little shaky, but she listens. I nodded. She's learning. Delaney began helping me update our client CRM. She streamlined our billing workflow. She redesigned our intake forms to look, her words, less 1998. Then one afternoon, I found her still at her desk past closing time. A spreadsheet open, a pen between her teeth. "Problem?" I asked. She looked up. "Actually, I was working on something. A potential client pitch. Integrating sustainable energy upgrades." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." She smiled, shy but real. "It's just a draft, but I think we could offer eco-friendly packages. Government subsidies make it affordable, and it could give us an edge over competitors." I didn't say anything. I just sat down beside her and started reading. And for the first time in years, I didn't see the girl who made me feel small. I saw the woman who might one day stand beside me, not as a dependent, but as a partner. By January, the girl who once winced at the sound of the word HVAC was filing contractor invoices and calling vendors by name. Delaney still took her classes, now at a nearby community college, but she came to work every afternoon. She answered phones with the kind of crisp professionalism that made clients assume she'd been with us for years. And she paid attention, real attention, Not the kind you give when you're bored, but the kind that signals a shift deep inside. One Thursday, after a particularly busy day juggling appointment reschedules, she tapped on my office door. "Got a minute?" I looked up. "Sure." She stepped in, holding a folder. "So, my business professor assigned us a capstone project, develop a scalable plan for a local business. I picked yours." I smiled. "You picked my company as a case study?" "I didn't just pick it. I'm building a proposal." She laid out a few pages: market trends, budget models, efficiency rebates. Then she looked up at me, half expecting skepticism. "I'm not asking you to actually use it," she said, "but I'd love your feedback." I flipped through it slowly. It was sharp, practical. She'd even run the numbers on cost-to-benefit ratios for integrating solar-ready HVAC systems into future contracts. "This is good," I said. "Like, really good." Her cheeks flushed. "He said we'd get extra credit if we used a real-world model," she explained, "and this is the most real thing I've ever been part of." That hit me harder than I expected. Not because she was finally appreciating the business, but because she was finally including herself in it. A week later, she got her grade, a solid A. The professor pulled her aside after class and asked if she'd ever considered launching her own business someday. "You've got a strategic mind," he told her. When she came home and told me that, I didn't beam. I didn't gush. I just nodded and said, "I can see it too." A few days after that, Holden called her. She showed me the missed call on her screen. No context, just his name. "He said he wanted to check in," she said flatly, "now that the holidays are over." "You gonna call him back?" She shook her head. "No, I think I finally understand what he wanted, and it wasn't me." She deleted the number in front of me. Later that month, we hosted a small get-together at my house. Just friends. Heather came. Trevor brought steaks. Delaney made dessert, by hand, not from a box. At the table, over dinner, she raised her glass. "To Mara," she said quietly, voice just a touch shaky, "who gave me more than tuition, who gave me the chance to unlearn everything that didn't matter and relearn what does." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The silence around that toast was the kind that doesn't need filling. Weeks passed. We fell into a rhythm. She worked. She studied. We disagreed. Of course we did. But the tone was different now, grounded, mutual, honest. Then one morning, she slipped an envelope onto my desk before heading out to a class. Inside, a handwritten note and a folded application form. It was a formal request to become a paid intern at Linwood Climate Systems, with a clearly defined scope, timeline, and learning objectives. The letter read, "I know you're already giving me a second chance, but I want to earn it, on paper. I want this to be real, and I want to be worth the trust you're showing me." She signed it with her full name. No flourish, just intention. And that afternoon, I filed it under Hires Spring 2025. Later that week, I caught her giving a tour to a new junior tech, explaining how our dispatch system worked, what kind of contracts we prioritized, why communication mattered more than speed. She sounded like me, and somehow, not like me at all. That night, we were closing up the office. I was locking cabinets. She was shutting down computers. As we stepped out into the evening air, she said quietly, "You know, I used to think success meant being untouchable, exclusive, distant." I glanced at her. "And now?" She smiled. "Now I think it's about impact, who you show up for, who you don't forget when the door opens." I didn't say anything, but I reached over and locked the truck doors with the remote. "You driving or me?" I asked. "You," she said, "but next year, maybe we'll take 2 trucks." That's when I knew. She wasn't just learning how to work. She was learning how to lead. 6 months later, we hosted Thanksgiving at my place. No crystal, no linen napkins, just turkey, cornbread, and Mom's cranberry sauce. Handmade by Delaney, who had written the recipe on an index card like it was sacred. She raised her glass. To starting over, and to learning that where you come from matters. That night, I didn't see the girl who once erased me. I saw someone who had earned her own place at the table. She was still taking classes, still working part-time, still pushing that green energy proposal harder than some full-time consultants I've hired. She pitched it herself at a local expo and didn't once mention my name. She didn't need to. One evening she asked, "Would you ever consider bringing me on as more than staff?" I said, "Drop a plan. Then we'll talk partnership." She grinned. "Deal." Later that week, she brought a guy named Carter to our cookout, an engineering student, quiet, respectful, smart. When she told him what I did, he said, "That's exactly who the industry needs more of." After dinner, Delaney pulled me aside. "I wouldn't be here if you hadn't said no." I met her eyes. "Me neither. Sometimes love isn't about what you keep giving. It's about knowing when to stop, so something real can begin."